Hi, I'm Clyde Kilough, and you are listening to Verse by Verse. When my kids were teenagers and would leave the house to go out with friends, I would often tell them in a joking way, "Hey, don't shame the family name." I said that with a smile, but behind it, they knew there was an unspoken, serious reminder that I did not want them to do anything contrary to what they had been taught. That friendly admonition was a little prod to remember that our actions do affect our reputation, our name, and not just ours only as individuals, but others in the family who bear the same name. Hence, don't shame the family name. I think of that occasionally when reading through today's section of verse, Hebrews 2:11 through 15, which says, "For it was fitting for him, for whom are all things and by whom are all things, in bringing many sons to glory, to make the captain of their salvation perfect through sufferings. For both he who sanctifies and those who are being sanctified are all of one, for which reason he is not ashamed to call them brethren, saying," and here he quotes 3 times from the books of Psalms and Isaiah, "I will declare your name to my brethren. In the midst of the assembly I will sing praise to you. And again, I will put my trust in him. And again, here am I and the children whom God has given me. Inasmuch then as the children have partaken of flesh and blood, he himself likewise shared in the same, that through death he might destroy him who had the power of death, that is, the devil, and release those who through fear of death were all their lifetime subject to bondage." Oh, now there's a lot to think about in these verses. Too much for one short podcast. We could give multiple sermons explaining how the phrase "bringing many sons to glory" summarizes God's entire purpose for creating us. We could talk at length about Jesus' coming in the flesh and sharing the human experience with us, or about his plan to render Satan the devil totally ineffective, or the promise to release humanity from death and bondage. Great topics and plenty of material for other podcasts. But today, let's zero in on these few words. He is not ashamed to call them brethren. Later in this letter, in chapter 11, verse 16, something similar is stated again, that those who live by faith, God is not ashamed to be called their God. So twice in this chapter, it confers that God the Father and Jesus Christ, his Son, are not ashamed to be associated with us. But not only that, to be called brethren, to have us in the family. I don't know about you, but to me that's pretty humbling. Who am I? Who are we to be so honored? We who are weak, sinful human beings, made in the image of God, but so often not living in the image of God, and yet in his love and patience, mercy, and kindness, he still loved us so dearly to make a way possible for us to someday be in his family. Christ gave his life so that all humanity could have a chance to be in his family. That is a level of love so far beyond what any human can muster that one can only stand in awe. And the family concept runs throughout God's Word. As Jesus said one time, "Who is my mother and who are my brothers?" And he stretched out his hand toward his disciples and said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother." There comes a time in life when a true follower of Christ comes to understand the real shame, the shame of sin, and turns from that to strive to do the will of our Father in heaven. Paul talked about this process in Romans 6, where he asked in verse 21, "What fruit did you have then in the things of which you are now ashamed? For the end of those things is death." Sin is shameful, and to the repentant mind is something to be ashamed of. But our Father and our older brother assure us that when we turn from that, they are not ashamed of us. In fact, we can be considered among those to whom God may someday be pleased to say, "Well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy of your Lord." It is so humbling and deeply moving that we serve such a merciful and loving God, who in spite of all of our weaknesses and shortcomings, allows us to bear his name, to be called his, to be called Christians. It makes me ask, if Christ is not ashamed to call me his brother, if God is not ashamed to be called my God, my Father, what can I do in return? Well, My cautionary words that I used to say to my own children come to mind. In everything we do, let's remember, don't shame the family name.
Verse by Verse is a companion podcast to the Daily Bible Verse blog, which you can find on the Life, Hope, and Truth Learning Center. Check out the show notes for more.